What I would like to do today is to perhaps make an argument that one of the gestures that we can do to close up that inequality and to meet some of these challenges of what we now call Industry 4.0 is education, and education in various forms as well. Us here in the university, we have a particularly crucial role to play in terms of mitigating some of these disparities. So this is our university. It's about 300 people. It's all of the university you see in this photo. So it's a very small operation, but through it we try to do a few things that I'll try to describe now as well. Right, we are a university of lifelong learning. The university is very new, 2 years old, but it has a history stretching back longer, up to the early 90s, where we actually were conceived as a kind of open university. So all of us here who are familiar with the open university system, you get an idea of how the role of a university in thinking about providing opportunities can be quite crucial in any economical and educational landscape as well. If you understand the open university model, you understand that this funnel image is something that we deal with in terms of operation, right? To provide for as many people to have access to education as possible. And here is one of the philosophies that we think about as a university in Singapore for adult learners, to provide the opportunities for people who previously may not have the opportunity to access university education, right? And therefore to make a pitch for equal opportunities, to make a pitch for access to learning resource, access to knowledge, skills, and so on. You will see in the 5 rings various approaches and dimensions that we work with. But the 3 words you see there, head, heart, and habit, is something that is written into how we operate day to day in a university. Head here represents knowledge and skills and what an institution of education has to offer and that students can have access to. The third one you see there, which is habit, is a habit of learning, right? It's a habit of learning to learn, a habit of lifelong learning, continuing education, and so on. It's something, again, I'll describe later on in this talk as well. But right in the middle of all that is the word heart. It's a sense of conscience, sense of social engagement, sense of being a part of a community. And that, I think, is quite crucial because those of us, we now find ourselves in an education landscape where the university is a producer of workers in the economy. We are no longer, or at least we no longer pretend that we are institutions that provide learning, education. We are now suppliers to the labor market. So what we want to do really is to remember that there is a connection between the individual, the institution, and the community. And so right in the middle of how we design our curriculum is social consciousness, community consciousness, engagement, and the word heart. But at the same time, we are mindful that we are part of a larger political economy, an institution that has to deal with knowledge, has to get that knowledge in terms of what is available on the ground. So we are also very keenly aware and sensitive to the needs of various disciplines and how that translates to what happens in the professions, what happens in the industries, and so on. So we are an adult university, adult education university, and about 2/3 of our instructors are not academic professors, they are actually practitioners from the industries. So they come into the class, they deliver what they think is the most relevant and updated issues of the day within the discipline, providing the students with what they need. And the curriculum therefore gets renewed and refreshed all the time in response to those changes in the industry as well. So the school that I work in is called the S.R. Nathan School of Human Development, named after a former president of Singapore. It is quite a crucial name that we adopted because he was also a pioneer of the social work sector in Singapore. So what this means is that as a school, we are now placed in the position of, in a way, providing the university with a kind of social conscience. Which brings us to, I suppose, what I do want to talk about today, and also the topic of this conference is, so what do we do with making knowledge, deriving knowledge in this age of rapid change? Now, most of you would be familiar with a scene like that. So it's a matter of instilling a culture of learning for the future. So we set ourselves up as a university of lifelong learning. So students come in, get a degree, but they don't just graduate, but we try to involve them in continuing learning and upgrading as well. So our alumni community forms also a bedrock for what we do as a university. Adult education is at the center of this. Adult education meaning that even if you're a young graduate, at any point of the way you need to retool in terms of what your profession needs, those things can be made available. So the skills that we instill in them as undergraduates are skills not just of the knowledge in their discipline, but skills of learning, skills of thinking about learning as well. Right, so all of those things are involved here. Now, if you look at the fourth point there, relevance, I think, is an issue. Relevance, and the final point on this particular set as well, the sell-by date of your degree. Right, we are very mindful that within 3 or 4 years of a student graduating from university, the skills that they have is no longer relevant. That's how fast the world is moving. That's how fast technological change is driving all these changes as well, right? So how do we skill the students in order that they can remain relevant, and yet without losing a sense of social engagement as well? So as I said earlier on, we are very deliberate as a university in trying to instill a sense of awareness about the individual's role within the community. So we built this right into how we think across the board, across all the disciplines that the university and its programs have, right? So we are a university of social sciences. The naming is very deliberate as well. So what does that mean if you are a student of business management in a university of social sciences? It's a question that needs to be answered. It's a question that we build into how we design these programs as well, right? Which is perfectly that a business decision, as the rector mentioned earlier on, a business decision is a social decision. It has social implications. An industrial decision has environmental impact, for example. So all of these things need to be done. All of these things are abiding principles that we work with as a university. Right? Inclusive education, which is the funnel that I talked about earlier on, right? That everyone who wants to have an education at the tertiary level should be able to be given that opportunity to pursue that, whatever their abilities, whatever their circumstances, right? But once they are within the system, it's up to how they make use of those opportunities, and we are very clear about that also as an institution. Now, what that means also is that in terms of permeating our work in relation to the industries, we also permeate our work into the community as well. So as part of the learning of our students, they will be involved in community service learning, whether you are a psychology student or a social work student or an accountancy student, you will be participating in some of these projects, solving problems, using the skills, using the knowledge that they learn as well. As far as we are concerned in Singapore with the universities, there's no such thing as a soft skill. It is a core skill. It's something that you need to know, right? You need to learn as well. right? So we build in, this again in as a compulsory component in how students undergoing an undergraduate education will have to take through a core curriculum. And we classify that into three categories. The first of which is a critical component, right? The thinking and reasoning component, where we think about skepticism, right? Questioning information that is provided. Constantly asking what is wrong with this. Constantly asking why you are telling me this thing in this particular way. So I'll give you an example. Accountancy students deal with financial reports all the time. They deal with business reports all the time. But they cannot take those reports at face value because the companies providing those information has a motivation about how they give that information. So that accountant, the auditor, need to ask questions about why that information is provided in that particular way. So skepticism is something we teach, and we are very, very clear about wanting the students to possess as a skill, right? We ask them to think about why they need to work. We ask them to think about why they need to do good, right? We ask them to think about how those gestures have an impact on the physical world, the physical landscape around them, right? Issues of sustainability cannot be avoided anymore, as Professor Carey mentioned earlier on as well, right? The second component that we work through as a core curriculum is the whole idea of inquiry, the whole idea of asking about what human engagement might mean. We talked about the empire, the first industrial revolution. We think about now what empires mean in 2018, what empire will mean in 2030, for example. Is it the corporates? Is it the private sector? Is it technology itself? And so on. So those are things that issues that are serious that the students need to really be involved in. And the final part that we deal with as a core curriculum for students is thinking about meaning making, thinking about story making, right? That we all have a uniqueness of story to tell, and that story intersects and bisects and interacts with other people's stories as well. And that forms the core of what humanity is, and that comes to the heart of what empathy might mean as well in Industry 4.0. So in terms of methodology, we do this by embedding it into university education. We do this because they're adult learners. We also make sure that the learning is both independent but also collaborative, right? It's reflexive in what it's done. We think of all the social and cultural impacts of some of these things. And the last 2 points here, I think, is really to do with the university of the future as well, which is learning data, learning analytics, right? Because we have all this technology available to us today, we can think about what each individual student's learning needs might be within their discipline, outside their discipline, within the core skills that they need to learn, and then we tailor-make the learning for them. And then with blockchain technology, we can really do these things in such a way that is so granular that the students' skills can be transferable from one environment to another, from one institution to another, and as kind of credentialing for their lifetime learning, education, and upskilling needs. With that, I end my presentation. I thank you for your attention.